Under the umbrella of a great saga are the men and women that make up the parts and puzzle pieces of the story. One such cog in the machine was Thorfinn Karlsefni, Christian, Viking, and settler of the New World, and part of the legend of Eric the Red. Charting the ice flows and raging swells of an unknown sea to carve out a rugged existence in a brave new world can be seen as a parallel to the tricks and traps that the world, the flesh, and the devil have laid before us. To survive such tribulations with simple faith, make up the skeleton of our own lives. Fleshed out with divine grace, and in a very true sense, we can relate to the warrior spirit and sense of adventure of the Vikings. During Christmastide, an explorer and ship captain named Thorfinn Karlsefni, who was wintering in Greenland, met the recently widowed Gudrid. Seeing that she was a woman of great virtue and intelligence, he desired to take her as a wife, and asked Earl Eric the Red if he could plead for her hand in marriage, as Eric was not only the lord of the land, but also her former father-in-law. Following Christmas and his marriage, Karlsefni heard of the strange lands that Leif Erikson had seen while lost at sea. With Leif's advice and blessing, a capable crew, and a spirit of adventure, he decided to seek out this unknown territory and bring civilization to it. While at sea, he began to recognize the landmarks that Leif had told him about. After several days, they anchored ashore and sent 2 Scottish scouts to explore the land. The scouts eventually returned with promising signs: grapes and mysterious self-sowing wheat. Satisfied with their findings, Karlsefni sent the party further inland to establish a colony. In spite of the livestock they brought, the Vikings suffered a harsh winter. Fishing yielded little and no deer were seen. Rather than despairing, the Christian Vikings placed their faith in the mercy of God. Meanwhile, a pagan who had accompanied the crew was performing secret rituals to Thor, his heathen god. The prayers of the crew seemed to be answered when a curious whale beached nearby. Karlsefni, who was knowledgeable of whales, was skeptical, as he had never seen one like this before. Nevertheless, the starving settlers decided to cook and eat the whale to satiate their hunger. One by one, they began to fall ill. Thorhall, the perfidious pagan, taunted them, saying, "Didn't old Redbeard, Thor, prove to be more help than your Christ? This was my payment for the poem I composed about Thor, my guardian, who seldom disappointed me." Realizing that they had been deceived by the foul pagan, Karlsefni and the other Catholics in the party threw the carcass of the whale over a cliff, having confidence that God in his mercy would provide for them. Sure enough, their hunting and fishing began yielding an abundance of food. Seeing this, Thorhall and the few other pagan Norsemen decided to return to Scandinavia. But they would never make it, as their ship was blown off course to Ireland, where they were beaten, enslaved, and killed. The Catholic Vikings, now rid of the pagan interlopers, took to their boats and scouted the rivers to settle further inland. Finding a lagoon full with fish, surrounded by stocked forest, and more of the self-sowing wheat, they founded a new colony, far more successful than the last. One day they spotted several hide-covered ships coming up the river. Inside was a group of Indians, who marveled at the size and sophistication of the Vikings. Disappearing back from where they came, the Indians returned with larger numbers. Being of good will, the Catholics raised white shields to the approaching group to show that they were friendly, and offered the Indians, or Skraelings in the Norse tongue, milk from their cows. In turn, the natives gave them furs, leather, and packs. Karlsefni consulted with the other leaders of the settlement and instructed the men not to trade their weapons with the Indians. Becoming increasingly greedy and demanding, the Indians wandered belligerently around the Viking village, causing trouble. Unfamiliar with European livestock, the natives thought it would be a good idea to harass the bull of the herd. Unfortunately for them, it did not end well. Startled by the raging bull, the Indians fled back to their boats. No longer interested in trade, a war party of hide-covered canoes carrying tribal warriors came to lay siege to the Viking encampment. Never being ones to back down from a fight, the Viking band met the Indians on the field outside the settlement. Battle ensued. Through superior tactics, technology, and stature, the Vikings prevailed, losing only 2 men, whereas their fallen foes were legion. Realizing that it would be no longer safe for the settlers, Karlsefni made the decision to relocate his people. Setting sail, bearing north along the shoreline, the itinerant explorers set up an encampment in an area known as Stromford, located perhaps in what is today Canada. Early one morning, the guard of the camp noticed something stirring in the nearby woods. Startled, they shouted at whatever was hiding to reveal itself. A one-legged man emerged from the foliage and fired an arrow, striking Thorvald, a brother of Leif Erikson. They pursued the man through the forest, but it was to no avail. He had managed to escape, and their companion lay dead. Being good Catholics, the men gave their comrade in arms a proper Christian burial and marked his grave with what might have been the first cross erected in the New World. The tragedy of his death would soon be remedied, as Gudrid, the wife of Captain Karlsefni, discovered that she was pregnant, and so it was she gave birth to Snorri Karlsefson, the first Catholic born in North America. When it came to pass that the child was 3 years old and was able to survive a long voyage, the crew set course for a return journey to Greenland. Along the way, they encountered 2 abandoned Indian children who joined their crew near Markland, part of present-day Canada. Out of charity for their souls, the Norsemen took them in, baptized them, taught them their language, and instructed them in the faith, thus making them some of the first American Indian converts. Upon their arrival to Greenland, the explorers were received by Earl Eric and invited to stay the winter in household, after which they parted ways. Karlsefni and Gudrid would go on to have more children. Following the death of her husband, Gudrid made a pilgrimage to Rome to see the Holy Father. Upon her return, she built a church with the help of her sons and took vows as a nun. Among the descendants of the courageous Captain Karlsefni and the ever-faithful Gudrid would be numbered 3 great-grandchildren who were Catholic bishops, 2 from the line of Snorri, the child of the Americas, and 1 from their other son.